Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now, today I want to talk about something which we're seeing more and more of. We saw it in the various arguments between protesters and two different groups of protesters last year when they clashed. We've seen it in riots over the last year. We've seen it between kind of nationalist groups, non-nationalist groups. Kind of groups focused around things like the regressive left end of social justice. We've seen it in the Me Too movement. We've seen it in the more recent Time's Up movement already to an extent, but to a lesser extent so far. You know, we've seen all of that, and it's crowd psychology or mob psychology or herd behaviour or herd mentality. You know, or any of these different ways of describing people coming together and kind of going with a flow set by the collective. And the problem that I have with this is that you have everyone, I think, would agree that being an individual is a good thing. Having your personal identity taken away is bad. And yet, here's the thing. More recently, we've had the people who go individuality. Let me be me, and I'll do the rest. Yeah, just leave me be. Let me live my life. I'll work with people. I'll deal with people. I'll happily cooperate. But just let me get on with who I am, what I want to do, and so on. In which case, they're not attaching themselves to anything else. They just want to be left alone to do their thing, and they'll engage and they'll work towards the betterment of society or whoever else, but on their terms. You know, within their little sphere, they'll do what they can. And then you've got the people who go, yes, individuality is great, but it needs to be codified, so we're going to be completely individual by having all these labels that describe us, which isn't individuality. It's you taking like a taxonomical view of yourself, like breaking you down into your composite parts, labeling all of them, and then throwing them into as many different pigeonholes as there are for those labels, meaning that all you're doing is attaching yourself to another crowd, another mob in each one of those boxes, which obviously is far from individualistic. It's much more collectivist, and that's not a particularly good thing, because it means that then what happens with collectives? Well, they draw groups of people in different directions, they bounce off one another, and things aren't always positive. So there are two angles that I kind of want to look at this from. The first one is the decentralized decision-making that revolves around all of this. And the other is an effect that happens where, for the most part, people will not help others who are in need when there are other people around, which is called the Bystander Effect, which we'll get onto in a minute. But first, with this decentralized decision-making, one of my issues with it is that a lot of these big social movements that just flow, they don't have leadership, they don't have any kind of structure to them, they're just a group of people that gang up behind a thing that they agree on, or a label that they're attached to, or any of those things, and they just surge, yeah. And they will either, if they perceive someone that's not part of their wave of people, then they will either crash against them and crush them, they'll flow over them and consume them, or they will flow away from them, leaving that person isolated. And you know, none of those things are healthy, especially if the social movement, the group itself, is focused very much around something that isn't realistic, isn't factual. And so, as a coach especially, and as someone that did planning and stuff like that before, there's a tool which I think I brought to you guys before in a couple of places, which is the SMART goal setting tool, I guess, which stands for each goal needs to be specific, measurable, agreed upon or attainable, and realistic, and then time-based. It has to have a time limit on it, so you don't just roll and waste your time kind of to no end. Yeah. So in regards to that, you're not going to be able to get a specific, well-formed goal from a leaderless movement. Yeah, no one's if you actually got that movement to sit down and try and hash out the specifics of what they want, then there are going to be so many people that disagree with tiny facets of it, disagree with the way it's worded, disagree with the specific focus, disagree with the means by which people want to achieve it, all of that kind of thing. Measurable. Everyone's going to have their own different specific thing that they want to measure it by, which means that it is going to be harder and harder and harder to achieve, which is why, again, we see so many of these social movements, when it actually comes to them being questioned on these things, they move the goalposts. Gender equality, already written into law in most Western countries, already protected along with all manner of other protected traits under various pieces of legislation that are already fairly well enforced, because it would be so much time and money that for people not to follow along with them for it to be the case. Yet then it becomes a case of, oh, well, we're not talking about access to opportunity anymore, we're talking about the specific wages for the same work. Okay, where are the examples of this going on where there isn't some kind of pre-existing contract, changes in work environment, difference in location, and so on and so on and so on and so forth? You know, oh well, it's not about that. It's about people just working and getting paid the same. So what? Why? What? But what if you're in completely different sectors? What if a man is working on an oil rig and so is earning more because he's also essentially getting risk pay, and this person is sat in an office and they're both doing the same number of hours, but the woman in the office wants to get paid the same? Is that what you're saying? Why? They're in completely different situations. You know, there's this huge thing where the goalposts get moved, and it only gets moved when you start asking them to measure it, asking them to actually take a look at where they are versus where their goal was set. And when they've already found that they've achieved it, they have to move it to something else. They have to find a different metric to measure it on. They need to find a different thing to work with, because otherwise their movement goes away, they lose their power, they lose whatever else. So then we're going to move on to the next part, which is having it agreed, which means that people have to agree, they have to work towards it. It needs to be attainable, it needs to be actually doable by those people in concert pushing forward. You know, if it's not actually able to be agreed upon and therefore isn't attainable by those people because no one's willing to work towards it, then you don't have any hope of getting there in the end. You know, when you've got the far right all throwing out different levels of one kind of traditionalism or another kind of traditionalism, or something that is so far gone or archaic that I wouldn't even call it traditionalism. You know, when none of them can agree, then it's not surprising that then none of them see any change, and they lose out on their arguments and things like that, because the things that they're putting forward don't have any weight behind them. They may very well be specific, they may very well be measurable, but then if no one's able to actually agree that that's exactly where they're going and what they're doing, or that that's what needs to be attained so that they can work towards it, then you're not getting anywhere with it. That's pretty straightforward. The art has to be realistic. You can all agree that you will grow wings and fly. Everyone can agree that you need to grow wings and fly. It can be measured, because as soon as you grow wings, you're going to know it, and wings is a fairly specific thing. But you aren't realistically going to do so, so your goal falls down. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to deal with there. Again, not something that you're going to be able to achieve when everyone's version of reality is not only different, but also people believe different things, they limit themselves in different ways, they all have varying values. And so that's why when you come to, again, on both sides of the political spectrum, for instance, You have people who are ignoring science, ignoring fact, be it the left ignoring biology and evolutionary psychology and neuroscience when it comes to discussing things like gender or surrounding issues, or the right with some of their things around ignoring evolution or suggesting that the world is flat. It doesn't pan out. And so, the goals that they want based off those slanted or broken or just plainly untrue beliefs really doesn't lend to doing anything, achieving anything. And that's again one of the problems where if you don't have a leader to at least try and call shots, to try and streamline things, to try and achieve a goal, make sure that it's functional, then you're not going to get anywhere. And then the last one is time-based. It has to be tangible. You need to be able to say, by this point I have this result, because if you don't have it by that point, then there's a good chance you're probably wasting your time. You're probably not doing anything that really benefits you overall. And so if there isn't this specific time-based element to it, then you're having a problem. When I first started with coaching, there was a time, and there still is an issue with this as far as I'm concerned, where I have these boundaries that I set in place and said, right, if it's not working, if I'm not finding enough clients, if I'm not being able to spend enough time doing the things that I need to do or want to do in favor of other things, then that's when I will start looking for other jobs to help bootstrap and help further funnel funds into my coaching so that then I can progress otherwise. I came to those dates, I started doing those things. I've worked with various organizations and various other bits and pieces to try and additionally help me based on those time stamps that I had given myself, based on those boundaries that I had put in place. And we've talked about boundaries before, where they need to be stuck to. The time limit is one that needs to be stuck to, because if again you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, but not achieving anything, that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result each time. I have tried in my own stuff with my coaching as my goal and my development of my coaching practice and of videos for you guys and of all the other things that I'm trying to work on and build out and get done. There are places where I'm like, right, okay, well, I need to do it by this time, and if I haven't done it by that time, then I've reworked it. There's a reason why you guys have seen an improvement in sound quality, in video quality, and some of the other things that I've been doing on the channel, and that's because I went, right, well, by this time I need to have this set up. So I need to learn how to do that. And so I sat down and I worked out what I needed to learn, how I needed to learn it, and then I did it. Straightforward. Without someone in charge, or at least a group in charge, monitoring the environment, monitoring the time that's passing, then you're not going to have anyone tackling the time-based issue, and so potentially the goal runs on infinitely. No progress could be made, and it runs on infinitely. Taking things like the arguments of intersectional feminism because it's an easy target. Are they specific? Hell no, because they change their mind every 10 seconds. Are they measurable? They are, but most of the data that already exists indicates that there isn't an issue, and yet they continue to suggest that there is because they keep moving the goalposts, because it goes from access to opportunity to access to outcome to weird specific things about word use to something else around decolonializing science and viewpoint and whatever else, which makes no sense. Are they agreed upon? No, because from the kind of intersectional feminism side and feminism in the third wave in general, you've got people like TERFs, the trans exclusionary radical feminists, who definitely don't agree with an awful lot of the stuff that's otherwise involved in the modern day intersectional feminist third wave feminist kind of run of things. You've got people who will go, yes, I am, but I don't hate men. You'll go, yes, I am, but I absolutely hate men. You'll have all of those different people. So no one's agreeing on this stuff, even from within their own camp. Are they realistic? No, because we're a sexually dimorphic species. All of the things that are being suggested or being called for are not realistic. As I've said in other videos, in places like Sweden even, where you have some of the best protections and kind of open exceptions made for both men and women on an equal footing, even they, in an awful lot of their industries, statistically see that in spite of the fact that there is very well protected equality of opportunity, you still have, rather unsurprisingly, women going for, say, childcare over men, and you still have men in most of the dangerous job roles in things like the fire service or in construction or oil rigs, whatever. You've got that split, and you're probably going to always have that split until such time as we've either evolved through our own intervention or through natural means into a creature that is completely distinct and different from what we are today. We are sexually dimorphic. We have been all the way back through our ancestors for millions of years to one extent or another. And so guess what? There's a chance that that's going to be the way that it remains. So are these goals of complete parity realistic? No, because people have different inclinations, people work in different ways, everyone's an individual, and so on and so forth. Are they time-based? No. There has been, for instance, one of my main criticisms of the he for she UN movement, as headed by Emma Watson. They have very little to show for the amount of time and hot air that they end up spilling out into the world. And so here is they don't say we will achieve this by this time and then they do it. They don't. They haven't made any kind of effort to do that. And so as a result, again, this is something that is exemplary of that movement as a whole. They aren't time-based. They do not focus on a time by which to have a thing achieved and then work towards it and then reevaluate if they hit that time and there has been no progress. There is no reevaluation. There is very little in the way of self-awareness, and this is again exemplary of all of these movements with decentralized problem solving, decentralized intelligence or decision making. So with that out of the way, that's one of the main problems with kind of dealing with this kind of mob mentality anyway, because you can't achieve things if you don't have goals, and goals need to be kind of functional in one way or another. I like SMART. It's something that I worked with a lot when I was doing corporate stuff, and it's something that I still bring to people when I'm doing coaching with them. So I'm very much in favour of that way of looking at it. There are other ways as well, but again, they have to be functional, and even regardless of which you're looking at, they all have. You can look at the GROW model, which I also use for the majority of my coaching in the more expansive sense. You can look at SMART. You can look at a whole load of different other different approaches to goal setting and planning, and almost all of them has to be measurable, has to be realistic, has to be time managed, because otherwise you're not going to actually have any basis to build from. You're not going to have anything to work with. But the other thing that I mentioned was bystander effect. And now this is something that I see more and more. And it's upsetting, because it's where people become sociopathic. Yeah? Devoid of empathy, of anything that would really allow them to connect with people on the other side. Whether there is another side or whether it's just their imagination, it's something that troubling, and it's something that we saw a fair amount of last year, like those black kids who abducted that disabled white guy and streamed it on Facebook as they beat him and whatever else. But to define it, the bystander effect is where overall individuals are less likely to help other people or a victim of any sort when other people are present. And they are, for the most part, less likely to help overall. And the contributing factors in this are kind of things like ambiguity. There's a lack of certainty around it. There's a cohesiveness with, everyone functioning together and that one person standing out as a victim. Well, why are you a victim when we're all fine? And there's a diffusion of responsibility. Well, why do I need to help him when no one else is? And this is where it kind of shifts to maybe being more bystander apathy. But again, those people may still feel genuine concern for the victim, meaning that the apathy element is maybe not the most accurate term. But in terms of actual physical action, their behaviour is apathetic, even if they aren't. There's no direction to help people, and so this is where we've seen individuals be victimized by the movement that they're in as a result of this decentralized decision making, where a wave of protesters has come in and just battered everyone in sight that they perceive as being the enemy. The number of protests that turned into riots, where neighborhoods were burned down, where random people who just fitted the description of their enemy were beaten and bloodied or severely harmed in other ways on the street. All of those things. And yet, even though those individuals who were rioting may very well have had a point, they may very well have had something to actually protest about. It might have been ambiguous in regards to where those other people stood, cohesive in regards to everybody else was attacking them too, diffusion of responsibility. I can't be doing something wrong if everybody else is doing this. And this is where these movements cause issues. Again, it's not just that they don't have goals that can allow them to interact with the world and allow them to interact with other organizations or people to achieve. It's the fact that they sweep people up. And even if you've got a person on the street, some white nationalist who's gone and attacked a counter-protest from across the street, he may very well go, there are people here who are just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He may feel genuine concern for those people when he's actually considering it. But in the moment, as a result of being driven by everybody else, that cohesiveness, that sense of being in place with those people, the diffusion of responsibility, I wouldn't be doing something wrong and dealing with it in this way if everybody else weren't also doing it. All of that kind of thing leads to then people getting severely harmed, killed, broken in different ways. And so I have a lot of respect for those people who will stand up from within their own movement and, take some kind of stand. Or those people that will stand against movements, especially when they demonstrate that they are not based in reality. It's why, even though I don't agree with, say, a good number of the skeptic YouTubers on this platform, I will still watch their content to find out what they're discussing. I would still quite happily engage with them in discussion, and it's very much a case of I respect every single one of them for standing up and actually having these discussions, opening their mouths and expressing their opinions, their findings, any research that they've found that supports what they're saying or debunks what someone else is saying. I very much respect all of those individuals for doing so, regardless of where they come from. But again, that then poses a different issue of which has also been raised by other members of the YouTube community in regards to, well, what if that becomes its own movement without a leader? And yeah, that would be an issue in and of itself. But again, for the time being at least, where it seems like each is working as an individual and having discourse, but otherwise not being swept up in anything, I can praise them for standing up when they get a lot of flack. Regardless of necessarily how they're doing it or what they're saying, at the very least I can respect them for standing up for what they believe in and the things that they say, and counteracting the bystander effect, potentially trying to raise awareness around the failings of the groupthink that is transpiring, to allow others from within that movement to maybe improve, or to allow others from outside that movement from getting swept away by it as well. But it's one of these things that I feel needs to be dealt with on a much larger scale. Something that people need to be made more aware of, and the fact that it's not something that is being expanded upon, like bystander effect and group psychology, crowd psychology, was stuff that I learned when I was back in doing my A-levels at the end of school. That was where I started picking up the beginnings of this, and then obviously as I've gone on, I've developed that knowledge a little more. But again, there are lots of people who aren't aware, and they get swept up by things easily. And that being the problem that it is, does lead to these huge movements that will then attack people, single people out, target them, dox them, leave their information for anybody to find and then use in all manner of potentially hugely harmful ways, especially when those people have families as well that might suffer. So what do I want to achieve by making this video and talking to you guys about this today? Well, simply put, be aware. The crowd kind of groupthink, crowd psychology of this whole kind of way that the world has been changing in various ways, with various movements pushing in all manner of different directions. Be aware of the ones that lack leaders, may very well be ones that have more of just an upsweep and just carry people off in all manner of different directions like a wave. And the other thing that I hope you take away from this is bystander effect is a thing. So if you ever find yourself going, oh, well, I'm here with these people, and if they're all doing it, then I can't do anything, I'm not doing anything wrong if we're all doing it, No, be the person that actually takes responsibility for yourself. We've talked about responsibility ad infinitum before. It's one of the things that makes a person strong. Yeah? And so if you can be responsible for yourself, take responsibility, do what you know to be right. Don't worry about how ambiguous the situation may be, or how confusing it may be. Go take responsibility for yourself, go and do some research. Don't get involved. Doesn't matter how close you are to the people around you. If they start doing something that you know to be wrong, then step away. And just because there are more of you that are all doing the same thing, again, if you know that it's bad, don't do it. If you're seeing a group of people that you count yourself as kind of part of beating the crap out of a random bystander on the street corner, just because they were in the way, or just because they looked a certain way, step in the way. Don't allow them to do something bad like that. Or step away and find someone else to help. Either way works. Just it depends on whether or not you're likely to be in harm's way. Because obviously if you can't look after yourself, then you can't look after anyone else either. I'm not suggesting that if you're seeing someone getting battered, you should throw yourself over them to protect them. I'm saying you should at least try and stop what's going on by whatever means you have available to yourself. Call the police, call an authority. If you can talk those people down and get them to move away, sure, if you're confident in your ability to do that, but don't let yourself be a bystander. Don't let yourself kind of be drawn into that unseeing, unthinking mass that means that you have no personal responsibility anymore, that you are only your attachments to the people that are there with you wearing the same colours. It's not substantial enough. It doesn't, when push comes to shove, you're all going to be in the same kind of set of issues. You're all going to be in trouble. Something is going to happen to all of you that is more likely than not to be bad. So look out for yourself, and by doing so, you look out for others. But anyway, guys, I hope you found this interesting, and I guess I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video or found it interesting, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.